Welcome to the Trial Time Podcast with today's special guest, entrepreneur Kevin Harrington. Everyone probably knows you best from Shark Tank, Kevin, but you have been an entrepreneur for a long time, the creator of the modern infomercial, involved in various other projects. One of them is Celsius, the energy drink, which I myself love. It's probably my favorite. I think Celsius and Red Bull are the only two I will drink. None of the others. I think Celsius is probably the most healthy for you. I know Jim's wife's a fan of one of the clothing brands you're involved in.
Yeah.
Kevin, tell us what you're up to.
Well, many years ago, just real quick, I was a young entrepreneur back in Cincinnati, Ohio, one of 6 kids, and I'm the 4th. And by the time it got to me, my dad's like, look, you're going to have to pay your own way through high school, through college, etc. He owned a bar. And so I started my own businesses when I was a teenager, and I've been an entrepreneur now, I say, for more than 50 years, which has been a lot of fun. So, but I was watching television, and all of a sudden my screen went dark, and it was dark for 6 hours. And I called the cable company. This is back in 1982. And I said, hey, this channel, Discovery, it just all of a sudden went dark. And they said, oh, it's only an 18-hour-a-day channel. 6 hours a day, you're going to get nothing. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head. I said, there's got to be something we can do with that 6 hours. And I ended up signing a long-term contract with the network Discovery for 6 hours a day under a long-term agreement. Now, they spent billions of dollars launching that channel. Yeah. I owned 25% of their media time for a number of years for $350,000 a year. It was the most unbelievable deal. It was generating tens of millions of dollars in sales. Of course, this is when I started As Seen on TV Inc., AsSeenOnTV.com, and all of a sudden we had hundreds of products, now thousands of products on a global basis, over 100 countries. And this was that's why I got the invite to be on Shark Tank. We were doing business with Jack LaLanne and the Juicer, and Tony Little Fitness, George Foreman, you name it. I mean, Kim Kardashian called and said, hey, I'd like to do an infomercial with you. And so we did her first infomercial also, as well as many others. So for 40 years, we've been in this launching a product business. This is the one you just mentioned, yeah. Celsius. 2013, I joined the board. This was a startup, literally a company doing, barely $1 million in business, with a value of, what's $1 million business worth, right? A startup. Well, recently we sold 7% of this company, and it's public now. It's on the NASDAQ. Stock went from 10 cents to $10 to $50 to $100. I mean, here's a company, 10 cents to over $100 a share. We built an $8 billion business, sold 7% to Pepsi for $550 million. So these are the kinds of deals that I love. And so what am I doing today? I invest in companies, but I also I sit on advisory boards of directors. I mean, that's how this started. I simply started as a board member. But what did I do? I opened up my Rolodex. I started bringing on investors, and I started bringing on lots of really cool influencers. And I brought Flo Rida in, 26 million followers. Khloe Kardashian, hundreds of millions of followers, right? They're sending it out. It's going crazy. Now we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of fitness Instagram influencers. And today you sell products a little differently than we did in the old days. In the old days, we used television to crank it. That's very expensive. I sold all of that 10 years ago. I sold As Seen on TV Inc., AsSeenOnTV.com, thousands of websites, and just said, I saw the handwriting on the wall because the business was going like that. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. I'm not sure if you have any other questions about any of
Kevin,
what
I
said
do
so
want
far?
to get into my wife's favorite thing with you, and let's hit. You didn't hit, and I hope I get it right. Deja Design. Am I correct?
You know, I'm trying to understand which deal that was. Because I'm involved in deals that I don't even know about, to be honest with you. My family, I've got a couple of kids in the business, and you know they put deals together. So I'm actually not up to speed on that one.
Well, let me tell you, Deja Design is a clothing, looks like more like women's apparel, but they've given you credit for coming on and helping the company.
Yep.
And not only that, not only helping them, but it looks like that they have taken off just like everything you touch. Does. So even though you may not know about it, you got the credit for it. So
well, I appreciate that. I mean, hey, sometimes you don't know about it, and someone's saying something bad. So
no, it's going great. And the guy that does the designs is well known, done things for all, Gucci and other stuff like so. Everywhere you are with that, with your sons, you're getting the credit. So that's all that counts. You're getting the credit for that taking off.
Yeah, Kevin.
Fantastic.
I learned something a minute ago. I didn't know how cheap you actually bought all that airtime from Discovery. Yeah. How cheap that was. Donald Trump wrote a book several years ago, that The Art of the Deal.
Yep.
I feel like you should have written that because that was the deal.
I was just buying up all the downtime of all the cable networks. And by the way, not just in the United States, but all over the world. I cut a deal with Rupert Murdoch. I owned dozens of hours a day on Sky Channel, and we cut a deal with Sheikh Saleh Camel in the Middle East. He owned Arab Radio Television Network, 5 channels. I owned 30 hours a day on 5 networks going into 20 Arabic countries. We had an office in Japan, an office in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We were shipping into 100 plus countries. And, this was the infrastructure of, you call it the modern day infomercial. Yes, exactly. This is what we did over the last 40 years.
Well, what I'm interested in is you gave a very quick description of you were watching Discovery 6 hours off the air, and all of a sudden, bam, it comes into your head. But bam, coming into your head to put something on for 6 hours and doing
on a podcast, I got to call you back, sorry.
And do that's okay, and doing infomercials, like you did. How did you come to that? I mean, I got to do something with 6 hours, but then you came up with this idea.
So at the time, I was actually selling businesses, and so as a business broker, and I used to go to a lot of trade shows. I go to if I'm selling restaurants, I'm at the restaurant show, and home and garden stores and flower shops, I'm at the flower shop or the home and garden conference. And so I'm at a conference and I'm watching this guy. You ever go to a trade show and you see a big crowd around the booth and everyone's watching? It's like, I'm watching this guy. He's got a knife in his hand and he's cutting through, all kinds of crazy stuff, through a hammer, through a pair of sneakers, through a muffler. He said it's called the Ginsu knife. So I'm like,
remember that.
I watched this guy, and when he got done, I bought a set of knives and I got talking to him and I said, my God, I said, that's one of the greatest pitches I've ever seen. He said, kid, he said, what do you, so what? It's this is what I do, but I do this 40 weeks a year. I'm here at the Philadelphia Home Show for 10 days. Then I go to the Iowa State Fair for 10 days. This is a tough business. And I said, that's when the light bulb went off. I said, hey, there's 6 hours with nothing on it, my man. How about we film this and put it on that time slot? And we did. And that was the birth. And just unbelievable. So anyway.
That's great, because the Ginsu knife was one of my favorites. I'll just tell you that right now. And by the way, it worked.
Yeah.
Yep.
It worked. It was a great knife.
I remember my grandparents my grandma saw that on TV and bought a set of those knives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cool thing is just having the opportunity to be in on the ground floor of something, and that's really what was most exciting about getting involved with the infomercial business from day one. The business has changed, and one of the reasons being is that there's a lot fewer people watching television today. Most people are on the internet now. They're watching Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. So we've had to do some morphing, and we're now more of a digital company in the process.
Well, let me say this to you. I know you've got to go, but a great man, great businessman, told me one time that people generally have 3, 4, 5 great ideas during their lifetime. The difference is that the few people who have these great ideas go and do something with them. I think that defines you. I think that's you in a nutshell. You can have great ideas, but if you don't do something about it, it's worthless.
I had my first book, and I thought I might have a copy of it close by. I don't, but my book is called Act Now. And the reason I said act now is I would go speak at a conference of entrepreneurs. There'd be 5,000 people there. And afterwards, hundreds of them would line up, and they would, I'm thinking about starting a business now for the last 10 years, but I've never done it. What should I do? And I'm like, look, if for 10 years you've had this idea, but what do you do? Every year you procrastinate. Now is the time to act now. So it's frustrating to me when people say that they've had this idea, but somebody else copied it, and now that somebody else made all the money. I'm like, well, hey, if you don't do it, somebody else will. And so now is the time, and there's so many opportunities today in the world of selling products direct to the consumer. You don't have to own the products. I've launched over 1,000 products. I didn't own any of them. I didn't invent any of them. I partnered, I licensed, I did deals with people. You don't need to be the inventor. And that's the beauty of the business.
Great.
Kevin, you're absolutely right. I'll say this, and I'll mention some of Jim's experience, but one thing we do on Trial Time Podcast is Jim and I are trial lawyers, but a lot of people go through trials and tribulations outside the courtroom, difficulties. Entrepreneurs have difficulties starting businesses off. I know I've got a friend right now having difficulty kicking off a business, so I'm actually partnering with him on that. I said, hey, I know how to start a business. I can help you out. What are some trials you went through in starting businesses? Have you ever had to bankrupt a business? You ever had to go through litigation? What do you think is a trial that you had difficulty going through?
Over the years, 40 years in the scene and TV business, 50 years as an entrepreneur, I've certainly seen lots of ups and downs. I've seen, I've been involved in litigation, but very small amount. For having done over $6 billion, only have a handful of lawsuits over 50 years is pretty awesome. So it's, and because I'm also a high profile guy. So, one day I get a lawsuit that's all over the newspaper, and it was totally frivolous, and the guy retracted it days later. It was like he didn't realize he was poking the bear. But it's never a dull moment so anymore today. I'm very specific on what I do and how I do it. But we had a company, and I'm involved right now on the board and advisory board and board of directors of about 25 companies. And at any one time, people say to me, how's business? And I'm like, well, I got about a third of them doing great, a third of them doing okay, and a third of them not doing so good. So how's business? That's how business is. It's one third. I can wake up every day and focus on the good stuff, but I also got to deal with the bad stuff. And that's, companies running out of money, companies filing, one of our companies filed Chapter 11 at one time. It was a profitable company, but this is before I had capital to be able to support it, and it had to file a Chapter 11 because it had some debt that was due and didn't have the capital for it, and ended up filing, but came out of Chapter 11 within 45 days. So, you know, you guys know how to do stuff. You're lawyers. You know the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding this. So anyway,
we call that the Clint Eastwood version.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's good.
I know you got to get off in a few minutes because I know you got some other stuff. We thank you very much for coming. Is there any kind of parting advice for young people that want to start a business, or even old people, just keep them focused and get through those trials?
Yep. Let me give you something I think is important. I think my last book is called Mentor to Millions. And I've mentored millions of people now over the years. And what I tell people is this. I've got a young entrepreneur that came in. He owned 100% of his company, and he wanted me to get involved with him. And so made a proposal, and I was going to do all kinds of stuff for him and help. And I said, just need, I got some official capacity, an advisory, a board position or something. Now, most people would say, I'd love to have Kevin Harrington on my board. But this particular person's like, you know what? I think I'm going to do it myself. Well, guess what? A year later, and they invested over $500,000 of their own cash and lost it all. They came back and said, sorry, we didn't, I'd asked for 1% of the company, 99% for them, 1% for me. And no, they weren't going to do it. I said, good luck. And they came back a year later and said, please, can we take that deal? And I said, this is crazy. Like, you need good advisors. And so I tell entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to get a good board. Don't be afraid to have an advisory board. Don't be afraid to give up a couple points of your company. 1% of this company, Celsius, is worth $800 million. Okay. Or no, I'm sorry, $80 million. 10% is 800 million. 1% is worth 80 million. Okay. So would you take 1% of that? This is the way things happen, So I say, get an advisory board and don't be afraid to give a little bit of equity to some folks. So, on that note, guys, I appreciate the time we spent.
Thank you, Kevin.
Get some good mentors, and it involves getting some good legal advice also. So that's where I'm going to recommend you guys then.
Thanks, Kevin. And listen, God bless you and good luck in the future. Okay.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Great to meet you. All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.